Inside Bastogne, the Americans were surrounded. Wounded men had no medicine, and some guns were down to only a few high-explosive rounds. Into that trap flew two unarmed C-47 transports. Standing at the door of the lead aircraft was Jake McNiece, the infamous leader of the Filthy 13, the unruly demolition men whose legend became linked to the Dirty Dozen. Pathfinder arithmetic was brutal.
We had 3 American divisions up on the main line of resistance in Germany there, the 104th, the 110th, and the 82nd. The 82nd.
McNiece was leading 2 teams, 20 men into Bastogne. According to a U.S. Army account, only one of them would be lost. But survival was not the mission. They had to land on the right side of a battlefield no one had properly mapped, signal the second aircraft before it was shot down, and place a beacon close enough to German lines to pull an American air armada through the sky. If that beacon failed, the guns inside Bastogne could fall silent. Bastogne mattered because roads converged there. For the German offensive pushing west through the Ardennes, those roads offered movement, fuel, and momentum. For the Americans, holding the town meant placing a wall in the path of that advance. The 101st Airborne had been rushed into the area with little warning. By December 21, German forces had closed the ring around the town. The Americans still had men. They still had tanks, anti-tank weapons, and artillery, but a surrounded force consumes everything it cannot replace. Every shell fired leaves one fewer. Every wounded man requires bandages, plasma, and morphine. Every day without food and ammunition turns resistance into a countdown. The Germans understood that pressure. On December 22nd, they demanded surrender. General Anthony McAuliffe answered with one word: nuts. It became one of the most famous replies of the war. But defiance did not create ammunition. The clouds above Bastogne had kept Allied aircraft away, and some artillery units were now down to fewer than 3 high-explosive rounds per howitzer. Some had no rations left. The men on the perimeter could refuse to surrender. They could not manufacture shells in the snow. The immediate lifeline would have to come from the air, and before the transport aircraft could find a safe drop zone, someone had to jump first. That someone was not a model soldier. Jake McNiece was a demolition expert from Oklahoma who had already jumped into Normandy in the Netherlands. His men were trained to land behind enemy lines, destroy bridges, and sabotage anything that could help German reinforcements move toward the front. In combat, McNiece was trusted with men, explosives, and objectives that could affect an entire regiment. Away from combat, the Army could barely control him. His section ignored regulations, fought, poached game, and treated military ceremony as an inconvenience. In England, their refusal to bathe regularly helped earn them the nickname the Filthy 13. Photographs of the men wearing Mohawk-style haircuts and war paint before D-Day turned them into a wartime sensation. They were not convicts awaiting execution, as in the Dirty Dozen, but their reputation for disorder, combined with their effectiveness behind enemy lines, helped feed the legend that Hollywood would later transform. McNiece himself repeatedly lost rank because of his behavior. After surviving 78 days in the Netherlands during Operation Market Garden, he received a short pass and overstayed it long enough to return facing arrest. His commander offered him a way out: volunteer for parachute pathfinder service. It sounded almost like punishment. Pathfinder teams went ahead of the main force. They jumped first, landed alone, and marked the ground for everyone coming behind them. An Army University press account describes the expected loss as 8 men from every 10-man team. But McNiece saw another possibility. The war appeared to be moving toward its end. Pathfinder training was in England. He believed he might spend the rest of the conflict sleeping in clean sheets, eating better food, and teaching other men how to jump. So he volunteered. Men who had followed him through combat volunteered with him. Within days, the escape McNiece thought he had found became the most dangerous assignment of his life. The Pathfinders had barely finished training when the order arrived. The 101st was surrounded in Bastogne. Food, medicine, and ammunition were running short. 2 Pathfinder teams had to fly from England, jump inside the perimeter, and guide in the supply aircraft. There was no careful intelligence package waiting for them, no detailed aerial photographs of Bastogne, no reliable picture of German positions. McNiece had no radio contact with the American commander on the ground. The briefing came beside the aircraft, with an officer pointing to Bastogne on a map and explaining that no one had heard from the division in 2 days. The planners could not even be certain the 101st still held the town. the pathfinders would have to discover that while descending beneath parachutes. McNiece immediately changed the plan. One 10-man team was not enough. If its aircraft was shot down, or if the men landed in German territory, the entire rescue attempt would die with them. He recommended 2 teams and 2 aircraft. His own plane would go first. If McNiece landed in friendly territory, he would throw orange smoke. Only then would the second C-47 release its men. It was a simple solution to a terrifying problem. One team might be destroyed, but the other could still complete the mission. As officers wished him luck, McNiece answered that luck was not what he needed. He needed a miracle. If you enjoy discovering the forgotten truth behind the war stories America remembers, subscribe to Forgotten War Stories, because for McNiece, the flight in the Bastogne was only the beginning. At 6:45 on the morning of December 23rd, the 2 C-47s left England. Inside the lead aircraft, 10 pathfinders carried weapons, smoke grenades, marker panels, and the equipment that could reopen the sky above Bastogne. Their pilot, Lieutenant Colonel Joel Crouch, was one of the most experienced men available for exactly this kind of mission. They would need every bit of that experience. As the aircraft approached Bastogne, German anti-aircraft fire erupted around it. An 88mm gun lay directly in their path. One round tore through the fuselage between McNiece and Sergeant Cleo Mertz, missing both men by inches. Crouch could not shoot back. His transport carried no guns and no armor capable of protecting the men inside, so he pushed the C-47 down toward the trees. The sudden dive drew the heavily loaded pathfinders onto the floor. Crouch roared over the German position at treetop height, scattering the men below, then pulled the aircraft back up to jump altitude. The pathfinders climbed to their feet. They had almost no time to recover. Somewhere beneath the snow, smoke, and broken roads was the American perimeter. Jump too early and they might land among the Germans. Jump too late and both aircraft might fly beyond the shrinking pocket or make another pass through the same anti-aircraft guns. Through a window, McNiece saw a large cemetery. He reasoned that only a town the size of Bastogne would have one that large. That was the confirmation he had. The green light came on shortly after 9:35. McNiece jumped. The first 10 men left the aircraft in seconds. McNiece did not wait to touch the ground. While still descending, he began throwing orange smoke grenades in every direction. The second C-47 was behind them, circling through German fire, and its crew needed an answer immediately. Orange smoke meant the first team had landed inside American lines. No smoke meant the second team might be jumping into a German position or into a field filled with dead pathfinders. The second pilot saw the signal. 10 more men jumped and landed almost on top of McNiece's team. Now the 20 pathfinders had to work before the German guns adjusted. Officers ran toward division headquarters to learn where supplies were needed. The rest carried their equipment toward open fields between Bastogne and Senolchamps. They laid out marker panels and placed their radio beacon on elevated ground. The device did not look dramatic. It did not fire a shell or stop a tank. Its purpose was simply to tell transport aircraft, through cloud and distance, this is the field, these are the American lines, drop here. 40 loaded C-47s were already orbiting over France, waiting for that signal. More aircraft were following behind them. Each minute the pathfinders delayed was another minute for German guns to find them, and another minute for the defenders to use ammunition they could not replace. McNiece's men waited until they could hear the approaching engines. Switching the beacon on too soon risked allowing German radio direction finders to locate it. Then Jack Agnew activated the signal. The aircraft found Bastogne, and at 11:50 that morning, the sky above the surrounded town changed. Hundreds of colored cargo parachutes opened above Bastogne. The sight was so sudden that German troops momentarily stopped firing. From outside the perimeter, the logic of the siege had seemed brutally simple. Keep the roads closed, keep the aircraft away, force the Americans to consume their final shells, their final food, and their final medical supplies. Then attack a garrison too weak to resist. But a force under siege is supposed to become weaker with every hour. Bastogne was suddenly becoming stronger. Every parachute carried time. Artillery ammunition meant German tanks could no longer approach guns that had fallen silent. Medical supplies meant wounded men had a better chance of surviving. Food meant the defenders could stay in their positions. Fuel meant vehicles could keep moving inside the perimeter. The first cargo aircraft crossed heavy ground fire unarmed and without fighter escort. By the end of the day, 241 transports had delivered 144 tons of supplies. American crews recovered approximately 95% of what had been dropped, and the change was not confined to the town. The same clear weather that allowed the transports to fly also released American combat aircraft over the Ardennes. German columns that advanced under the protection of cloud were now exposed on the roads. The German ring still existed. German attacks continued, but the clock had reversed. They were no longer waiting for Bastogne to starve. They were racing against a garrison, receiving ammunition from the sky, American aircraft striking their movement, and Patton's relief force pushing from the south. A later U.S. Army study described German commanders as becoming desperate. The German Army Chief of Staff in the sector concluded that the initiative appeared to have passed to the enemy. The Americans were still surrounded, but the Germans were beginning to lose the battle around them. McNiece's mission did not end when the first supplies landed. He selected 2 additional sites for beacons, so the aerial lifeline could continue even if one position was destroyed. When darkness stopped the drops, the pathfinders searched for shelter inside Bastogne and found space in the basement of a 3-story chateau. They had barely settled in when a German bomb struck the building. The upper floors were torn away. The basement collapsed around the men, trapping them beneath debris. Jack Agnew and John Dewey had been outside when the bomb hit. They rushed back and found a narrow opening into the ruins. The pathfinders began crawling out. Then McNiece saw what was waiting beside the exit, an unexploded bomb only feet away. There was no second route. The men could remain beneath a collapsing building or climb out beside a bomb that might detonate if the debris shifted. McNiece warned the others, jumped over it, and ran. One by one, the pathfinders followed. Every man escaped the basement, and they carried most of the signaling equipment with them. McNiece then made another decision that sounded reckless, but followed a hard battlefield logic. German aircraft were less likely to bomb positions close to their own troops, so he moved the pathfinders away from the center of town and toward a farmhouse near the perimeter. They spent Christmas Eve there after another day operating the beacons. Outside, the Germans continued trying to crush the pocket. Above them, more American aircraft kept arriving. Over 5 days, the Air Corps dropped more than 600 plane loads of ammunition, gasoline, food, and medical supplies into Bastogne with the help of the Pathfinder's signals. The effect was not abstract. An official Army study later concluded that without the aerial resupply beginning on December 23rd, American artillery would have fallen silent and become easy prey for German forces. Instead, the guns kept firing. German attacks on December 24 and 25 tightened the ring in places, but failed to break the defense. Their commanders asked for more forces. Some wanted the attack stopped. The German 5th Panzer Army understood the danger but had little left to offer except promises of reinforcements. Then, late on December 26, American tanks from the 4th Armored Division broke through and made contact with Bastogne's defenders. The siege had been pierced from the ground. The Army study's judgment of the German position was blunt. All hope for success at Bastogne had died. McNiece and his men had not won the battle alone. The defenders on the perimeter, the artillery crews, the cargo pilots, the ground teams recovering supplies, and the armored forces fighting their way north had all been essential. But the Pathfinders had solved the problem that could have made all that resistance impossible. They had given hundreds of aircraft a precise place to deliver survival. And the odds inside McNiece's 2 teams produced one final contradiction. They had entered a service in which a 10-man stick was expected to lose 8. On the Bastogne operation, the U.S. Army account records only 1 soldier lost from the 20 men McNiece led. The mission had been built around the assumption that most of them would not return. 19 did. Hollywood gave its Dirty Dozen a chateau, a group of condemned criminals, and a mission to kill German officers before D-Day. The real men behind the legend were not death row convicts. And Jake McNiece did not volunteer because he wanted one final chance at redemption. He volunteered for Pathfinder training partly because he believed it might keep him away from another combat jump. Then the Army sent him toward a surrounded town with almost no preparation, no aerial photographs, no contact with the men below, and a mission designed around catastrophic losses. There was no chateau full of German officers waiting at the objective, but there was a chateau that collapsed on top of his men after the mission had already succeeded. There was no promise of freedom if he returned. There were thousands of Americans inside Bastogne who might not survive if he failed. The film invented the criminals in the assassination raid. It did not invent the kind of men who could be nearly impossible to control in camp, and exactly the men the Army trusted when the mission allowed no second chance. On December 23, 1944, Jake McNiece jumped into a town Germany believed it could starve into surrender. 20 pathfinders went into the trap, and instead of closing around them, the trap opened to the sky. If you want more forgotten war stories that sound impossible but really happened, subscribe and follow us.